Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another chapter in my little black book. Today, listen, the Iran shit has been a lot, but we're not talking about that today. Today, I want to talk about the illiberalism of the Democratic Party. So, obviously, the Republicans are a shit show, right? They are authoritarian, they are evil, and, they are about as incompetent as they are evil, which I guess is to our benefit. I'm not saying it's not. The problem is that come 2028, here's the big issue when it comes to the Democratic Party and the state of our country come the presidential election of 2028, which is, again, 2.5 years off still. The big problem that I foresee is the Democrats, in the face of a J.D. Vance, or hell, even a attempted third term of Donald Trump, will look at the last decade and a half of politics, right? That, the absolute degradation of our country in the face of right-wing politics and corporate interest-focused politics, and then elect to do a return to the status quo. Because here's the problem, right? The last 10 years, this period, these last 10 to 12 years of politics is the Trump era. Joe Biden was president for a time, but he was just a bump in the road. And I would argue that Joe Biden winning the 2020 presidency was worse in hindsight for this country compared to Donald Trump winning a second term, because that second term would have been filled with, again, the same do-nothing Republicans and bureaucrats that in infighting that would ultimately just lead to a stonewalling of things getting done. It would have killed Trump's popularity even faster. But let's not mince words about this. Joe Biden did nothing. Objectively, do I know that he was the most pro-labor president of my lifetime, which, by the way, is a fucking travesty, by the way, but even so. And he had a lot of really awesome, at least ideas for domestic policy if it wasn't, shot in the cradle by Joe Manchin and Christian Sinema, which, by the way, those people should have no peace. The fact of the matter is, once October 7th happened, Joe Biden, just gave a blank check to a foreign country to do whatever they wanted in flagrant violation of, international law, and just didn't care. And and he just cared more about serving these international interests compared to, helping Americans and doing what Americans wanted. It was, none of the policies, even with some of the good policies that he was able to implement, none of it really stuck. Almost all of it was reversed immediately by the time Trump came back into office. And frankly, at the end of the day, all that was really left was just this feeling of resentment by Americans of just you tried to bring us back to the Obama era. You not only did you fail to do that, but we don't want that. And the problem is that a lot of the Democratic establishment as it currently exists wants a return to that time period, because that was the time period where they could just rake in corporate money and get elected for doing incremental like improvements and being good stewards. Like, the Democrats at the end of the day don't ultimately dislike a lot of the things the Republicans are doing. They just think that they're doing it brashly and they're not being good stewards of the country. It is ostensibly revolting at the end of the day that none of the Democrats that are, right of the left have said that the war in Iran is immoral. Like, a lot of the biggest issue with a lot of these fucking Democrats is that, like, they wave their finger and tut at the Republicans for, like, oh, you didn't file the proper paperwork before you did this. I'm like, you dusty motherfuckers. And so this brings me back to 2028. If the Democrats put forward a vision and a candidate like a Gavin Newsom, whose entire shtick is to return to the status quo, and they win, I think that is going to give Republicans the government for a generation. Not because, the Republicans' ideas are better or the Republicans have more supporters and a better chance of winning. It's just if the Democrats just abstemiously, like, kicking and screaming, put their feet in the dirt, their heads in the dirt, refusing to listen to what their constituents want in favor of the constituents that they want to listen to, which is corporate interests, you're going to disillusion an entire generation of voters. Multiple generations of voters. It'll almost be like a bulk, we'll be like the Balkan states, where just people where, our governments are right-wing and reactionary and evil, even though most of the constituents aren't like that, just because nobody participates in electoralism because of disillusionment. And that will give the Republicans a generation of power that they otherwise wouldn't have had. If the Democrat, there are two outcomes for the Democrats. Only two. They run a progressive candidate, which they're going to never want to do, and they're going to fight tooth and nail on doing. But if they do that, and they do adopt policies like that their constituents want, like universal health care and high taxes on the wealthy and, no interventionism overseas, it will be a century of Democratic rule. Period. The Democratic Party will be resurgent, and Republicans will and conservative and it will lead genuinely to the death of the conservative movement. Period. Or they put in Gavin Newsom, or run Kamala Harris again, or I even heard Hillary Clinton wants to run again. And they'll most likely win, and then 4 years will pass, and then they will not win again for like another 20 years. And this country will, and it will mean the death of this country in any meaningful way. This country will be stripped for parts by conservative and capital interests. Which way, Democrat? Of course, they're going to want to go the way with corporate PAC money, so yay. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, this has been another chapter of my little black book, now closed. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked this episode, join our Discord, link in the description. We got a good community, and we'd love to have you. Otherwise, this has been HIMediaTV. I've been your host. I'm from HIMediaTV, and I'll see you guys next time.